Welcome to the Creative Plan Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews of items, and convention panels, and other exciting things that we run into from time to time. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
I like to moderate in the middle.
Yeah. So you can hit anywhere.
That's true. What are you doing? Mr. Springer?
Yes. Oh, the things with the things.
The things with the things.
The things with the tall things.
I think
Would you hold that?
this is almost full on the battery, so I think it's going to be alright.
Okay.
I can get you the cable if you think it best.
I would say always cable up. That's
Alright,
just
I'll
me.
cable up. Alright, Mr. Springer, I always listen to you on your advice there.
Then you should be fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I can do that.
It's maybe what I am today. Tied a little too tight.
Oh. That
That's
happens.
not a good thing.
I said my OCD is maybe what I am today. Tied a little too tight.
I mean, I relate to that too. Alright, and we'll just, I'll add text later.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
And I'll get the cable out.
Would you hold that? I make you my assistant to hold all the things. See what happens when you're not on a panel?
I was trying to give you breaks and not overschedule us for everything.
It's nice to actually kind of sit and enjoy a panel once in a while.
Yeah, no, I thought let's try this thing where Temperance and Evie and I are not doing everything.
That's crazy.
Yes.
Gave me opportunity. That's what it looks like go shopping and.
What madness is that?
Put like foundation in a couple of things.
Is
I know. I
Various
almost bought
colors. So where's my ring going?
Oh, you know the vendor, I'm just saying.
I know. She's just like she's really good at selling.
Yes.
She comes up and she
Where would you like this battery?
takes her
I
little brush
got
and everything. It
Aw.
was so cute.
Like such things.
Yes.
Yes.
You have.
So,
Let me know.
I could write a story.
Up there.
I'm rid of it.
You like write it on the back.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience. Yes. I like to live cast our panels so that you may all review them and you may all go back and go, what did we say? What did we talk about? Oh, that was the thing. Very exciting. Oh, you are perfect angel creature. You never do. All right. Yes, please burst out to compliment you and be not careful. Oh, no, you're good. Well, how are we doing on time? Are we at the hour?
12:05.
All right, we're at the hour. So now we can continue with the shenanigans. I would like for each of you to go down the row, introduce yourselves, and maybe give a short, how did you come to steampunk? Short, Short. Oh, yeah, no, I know. I have like an essay, book-length short story novella, and Hallmark movie version. So
I was bored.
So there it was. Okay, so I'm Dr. Sparky McTrowell. With my partner in STEAM, Chief Inspector Rasmus Drake. We write The Adventures of Drake and McTrowell. Perhaps you've seen us in the vendor hall, or were fortunate enough to do our Hot Potato School of Writing.
so good.
So many shenanigans. I came to Steampunk through Girl Genius by the Folios.
Yes.
And I had been involved in fact, I came to this con back when I was in high school and college in Tucson, like 40-ish years ago. And I've been involved in a lot of, I've read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, but I think it wasn't until I met Steampunk and that I saw Girl Genius that I felt like I was just going to jump in the deep end of the pool. And we kind of did that at the same time with the help of a friend who's like, hey, I'm going to be in town and there's a steampunk convention. I know you guys kind of like that. Why don't you come on down? And that's kind of how we wound up in the deep end of the steampunk pool.
I'm Chief Inspector Erasmus Drake. I was born in a boiler room under oily rags and using... No. Okay.
I'm like, all right, here we go. We're in it now.
It's on.
It's the same story as hers, and I won't bother to embellish it too much, other than we showed up at this steampunk convention with friends, and we were dressed probably in the equivalent of blue jeans and etc. And I think the only thing we had that we thought was even slightly dressed up was like a shirt. And we walk in and we're like, oops, we've obviously walked into some show like where they're practicing, because everybody's dressed up. And so we literally walked in and walked out. It's like, oops, we're in the wrong place. And it didn't take us too long to figure out that steampunk conventions were different than any other convention, in that everybody had something on. We were used to Comic-Con where maybe 40%, and the rest are sort of dressed in other casual clothes. We bought what effectively was our iconic outfits in that, and then we started publishing on the web and doing other steampunk related things. And once you get into the deep end of the pool, it's hard to get back out.
That's true.
And a ladder.
I'll come back to me. I'm going to move to our lovely guest here.
So I am Dion Deviation on the web, one half of the Indigo Path, which is a fashion and art business local here to Tucson. And as far as getting into steampunk, which I am not wearing today and was yesterday, as far as getting into steampunk, I think my first encounter that was not classical steampunk, I'll put it that way, was actually the movie Wild Wild West. When that movie came out, all the different, they had taken all this stuff I knew and made it steam powered, and it was so clever. And I was obsessed with it for the longest. So now I didn't see this again until I started going to anime convention in Atlanta. And just because Atlanta is kind of small, there was a guy, and I cannot, what was his name? Jacques Montague Fromage. Yeah, he's amazing. You've seen him. I know Fromage is at the end.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Montague Jacques Fromage.
There we go.
Montague Jacques.
Jacques
Oh my
Fromage.
gosh,
and
he's a
he
delight.
is just amazing. And he was at the convention and was just a spectacle. I have no other way to put it. He was amazing. And I was doing a maid cafe at the time. The both of us were in, and I actually needed a way to better focus at a maid cafe. I'm a big role player, and once I'm kind of nice in my role, I can actually do things that as my normal self would not function. That sounds really odd, but for whatever reason, when I'm in a character, I am that character for the time. So my first character became a automaton who could, do things for the maid cafe that I had trouble focusing on without having the buffer of that character. And so that's kind of how. That might be both of us, actually. That might be I feel like he was the first person we met. And and so we found out about Atlanta's steampunk scene, which was, at the time, we weren't quite age appropriate for the scene. So that was kind of the introduction there.
And so I'm Gaius Augustus. Mostly what she said. I think I loved Wild Wild West when I was a kid. I don't think I associated the word to the fashion until much, much later when we were going to cons. And I was healthily obsessed with Jules Verne novels for a long time when I was younger. But again, never associated that with any kind of culture or fashion because I didn't really go out and do anything. I was just, a little nerd. And so when we started doing steampunk, it was just another one of the fashions we were kind of doing. But it's also been one of the best ones for building a character and really just like being able to just go out and just have fun being a totally different person for a while.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dion. I'm Madame Askew, and Very happy to be here. Been coming to TusCon for a while now to have your history, Dr. Sparky. But I love that you came here and, when you were just a wee strip of a thing, it's very youthful. So I've been doing steampunk now for a while, and I came at it through books, through literature. I found the stories first, and I sort of gobbled them up. It used to be you get one a year, and it was like, oh, there's more steampunk in the universe. Smell it. I'd acquire it, and then about 8-9 years ago, suddenly I was like Googling, as one does, and I Googled on the Google machine, and steampunk fashion came up, and it was such a revelation. People do it. People dress like this. People make art. No, there's music too. Wait, there's a convention happening in March, and it's December. I guess I need to make clothes. So that's how I fell into the community. It was about 3 months before the first Wild West Con.
And this is definitely the deep end of the pool.
Oh no, I'm a lifer. I never escape. I bring everyone with me. So that's my intro. Now this is called the Steampunk Starter Kit, and it's kind of like a 101 that you may have seen at some panels, but I hope with some twists on it. Please do ask your questions as we're going through the panel, and if you have a question for a particular member of the panel, just say, I really want to ask Dr. Sparky where she got her smashing chapeau, for instance. Legit. Also, I do want to know that at some point.
All right.
All right, good. So, one of my questions for our panelists today is, what was a tool that really helped you engage once you discovered it? How did you go from, woo, I found it, to, oh, I want to, do the thing, get the costume?
So is this like, I found the thing that then I had to make a costume out of the whole thing? Because that happens to me all the time.
I mean, that could be, you can interpret that question 100% that way, should you like. I like the open-ended questions.
All right.
Plus, I've had 1 cup of tea, so we're all on that ride together.
Do we need to send somebody out to fetch more?
Like 3 pots is where I should be at
Yes.
right now.
3 pots.
Yes.
So, actually, funnily enough, it's not officially a word, funnily enough. I should also point out that my partner in Steam here is a notorious troublemaker when it comes to my clothes. He's forever talking me into things where I'm like, no, I don't need that. This is like even in real life. And then I'm like, I don't have anything that goes with, I'm going to have to do a whole new outfit. And then he makes his face like, why are you telling me this again? Like, So we were at an outlet mall one day, and back when there was 9 West. And I know, sad. They're recently demised. Anyway, but I found this pair of boots. They're like ankle boots, and they were like canvas and leather, and they're like sort of like a linen colored canvas and some suede, and you're just drooling. So
Yeah, it's true.
And pointy toes and heels, and he's like, ooh, these are cute. And I'm like, yeah, but I have nothing they go with. And he said, and then he made the face. And so I don't yet have this costume, but I'm working on a steamboat gambler costume. My costumer friend in San Diego, Colleen Rodriguez, is making the costume, because unlike Madame Skew, I'm not a seamstress. But she's making it for me. But it really, seriously, I'm working on this costume, and I've got like the overskirt, and I've got the parasol, and I've got the shoes. But this all started with a pair of shoes. So just like writing, where ideas are everywhere, costumes are everywhere. You can just see something and think, ooh, that's the beginning of some costume.
I'm actually going to go back to, I'm trying to remember the name of the con, the Aileron, the original one that we went to.
Nova Albion.
Nova
Oh
Albion.
my gosh, you got to go to that one.
Yes.
Yes.
So we walk into the vendor room, and we have no steampunk anything. And the first thing she latches onto, of course, are these great big cape coats that are made of leather, and multi-$100 worth of investment. But I said, if we're going to do this, we need to pick some kind of personality, because we can't just buy whatever looks shiny, because you'll end up with a mess.
Oh, you could.
And she said, I want to be an airship pilot. And I'm like, okay, but doesn't everybody want to be an airship pilot? And she goes, no, I want to be an airship pilot and a chief surgeon with medical capabilities. And I thought, that's amazing, because in real life, she doesn't even like the sight of blood. And like, at the time, we weren't thinking about writing or anything. I was like, wow, that's like, here's the personality I wish I could have. And so I'm like, well, I need to think of something. And I'm walking around the room, and literally, I found a policeman's whistle. It was just one of the, $7 policeman's whistles made out of whatever junk metal that's shiny and silvery. And I said, that's it. I'll be somebody from Scotland Yard. And from that, we built our two iconic images. But for the one thing, the one tipping point, it was that policeman's whistle.
That's fantastic. I love those details. I'm going to continue with these two wonderful humans in a moment, but I'm going to dovetail. I think an important note is that you do not have to arrive steampunk with a persona fully formed. You actually, I think you need never have a persona, but if you want one, that's fantastic. But the littlest things can set you off on the path to the persona. And my story of how I became Madame Askew is because of my friends. They're sitting in the audience right now. Hello. I run the TusCon Steampunk Society, and I have been doing so for many a year now. And I have a strict rule for myself that I should always be the first one to any event, because I'm in charge. And I should be there when everyone arrives. And I want to be there at least 15 minutes in advance. But generally, I shoot for half an hour. That's my personal schedule that no one else imposes. No one else is watching for, but I am. And so originally, when I was doing this, pardon me, I was a little steampunk, and I was being yoked to the scene, and I was so excited to throw some events. I was like, I'm going to get to everything on time. And I was late. It was always only like 10 minutes early. And so I'd show up. I was American in those days. And I'd show up at the events, and I'd be like, where's all this stuff? Oh my gosh, what's going on? And I'd have a hat, and my hat would be like this. I'd be like, where are the things? And my hat would get more askew. And so, this is true. And,
You can't make this up.
No, life is stranger than fiction. And so we were at this one event. I was still American. We were at this one event, character creation, and Temperance and her twin sister had watched me run around the room with my chapeau going increasingly further onto the side of my head until I'm like standing at my position and I'm like, is everything here? Where's my hat? And they go, you're so askew. You're like, you should be askew. You're like Lady Askew, Mrs. Askew, Duchess Askew. I was married at the time. Mrs. was all right. I'm single. And they were like, no, we've got it, Madame Askew. My friends made my character who I am today. And that's my story.
Huzzah. That's what we should call you.
Yeah, and I changed nationalities at the same time. It's remarkable.
Went all askew.
Everything.
Askew.
Knocked her over the pond.
Right. So askew, I moved across time and space to different era and country. There we go.
Oh, wow. So we're going to kind of like talk together, because what ends up happening is we do this kind of creepy thing where we just kind of interrupt each other. I think you have seen it really well, but yeah. So honestly, I think we might have to answer the opposite of the question. Again, I spoke on kind of being, when we discovered steampunk being like not quite age appropriate. And in Atlanta, all of the steampunks had a good 20-year lead on us.
Oh.
And it was just one of those, and then we actually got a little jealous because it's like, well, I don't grow a mustache, so it felt like we were like the little fake steampunk babies.
And they were very much like the upper class steampunk. So they were all like gentlemen and ladies, and we were like, we are not cultured at all.
So our it shows in our characters when we're a little rough and tumble. So as far as finding the right looks and the right things, actually, I don't know if it counts as a tool, but for me, it's been really delving into history and looking at when the steam revolution occurred, right before industrialization, and when the Victorian era was, because now technically the steam era is bigger than the Victorian era, and then using that to say, okay, I'm not all into this. Like, I even if I tried, you would get a good laugh watching me trying to look very cultured and wear very nice clothes or walk in shoes that are taller than flat. And we couldn't do it. We couldn't.
We
would
tried
see,
for a few years.
got a little pocket watch and and we just couldn't do it. So a lot of our stuff actually went into other aspects of either cultures that were being heavily visited by Britain during heavily visited.
Colonized, oppressed, and stolen.
So we went into other cultures and different things that were going on to find our fabrics and our look and our thing. So
I think we also started thinking along the lines of, instead of being historically accurate as far as Victorian, how can we say, okay, let's just pretend that steam power stuck. What would today be like? And we were like, fashion would have moved on from Victorian.
Yeah.
But it definitely wouldn't have gone where it went. So how do we kind of mix that in and make it so that we're being respectful to the steampunk idea and the steampunk, feeling, but kind of giving it our own twist based on both real histories and real places, and where we kind of feel things might have gone had things stayed steam powered, which in actuality is like very inefficient, right? Like there's very few ways to use steam power in the mass way that we use electricity and things today, which makes it way more fun to try and figure out how we can make society work fully on steam.
Yeah. And so because of that, we actually tend to take a lot of our stuff from the concept of tribalization. We wouldn't have been able to have huge cities if we had stuck with steam power. Cities would have been much smaller, probably with your whole of everything you're needing. And my doctor lives here, where I buy my clothes is all here in the same town. So you kind of become little tribes versus big metropolises. So honestly, I think our biggest kind of tool to help us in steampunk has been playing with history and then visiting the writers.
And I was going to say imagination.
Imagination, yeah. Visiting the writers, borrowing someone else's imagination, reading what other people have already written and saying, oh, no. Octavia Butler didn't necessarily write steampunk, but Octavia Butler is one of my favorite authors for taking uncommon pieces of history and looking at, well, how would it have been different, or how can I interject something in here? And it was so, a lot of hard nerding. As we decide, it's a thing, hard nerding.
It's the best type of nerding.
I embrace that term.
Yeah, hard nerding.
So I'm going to take some of your points throughout our statements, invite commentary. I'm probably going to be less good at my normal questions, so I apologise.
Send someone for tea.
Right, bring all of it. So I do this thing, and I heard it a little bit from you too. Victorian, that word comes up a lot, and there's a really heavy association, I think, between that idea of Victorian and steampunk. And sometimes when I meet newcomers, they think that's all it is Victorian. And by the way, I love what you do. It's so good.
Thank you.
I also love what these two do. So we've got just a wonderful array of steampunk ideas up here. But what I have begun doing more strictly with myself, and it's inspired by a wonderful steampunk thinker, Dr. Per Schon, who's a Canadian scholar. I love him. He's so dear. the steampunk scholar. He actually got his PhD in steampunk literature. He's a mensch. He's really lovely human, and he's very strong that steampunk is not Victorian. Victorian is a piece of the steampunk sort of arsenal of things you could draw from, but to say only Victorian is to cut us off from the entirety of the world, and to also limit the conversation so you never talk about things like colonialism, tribalism, appropriation, stolen culture, stolen cultural artifacts, all of these things that could sound really dreary and depressing, because in reality they are terrible, terrible things that happened, but they can also be a strength in our community from which we can draw art, inspiration, dialogue, and I think it was like Captain Lagrange or one of those delightful creatures who's like, I like to think of steampunk as the past better. We could make it better. And how can you make something better if you ignore those sorts of, nasty bits? So I try very hard for myself now not to do that shorthand, although, if you're in a convention of several 100,000 people and they ask you, what is steampunk? What about time 300? I go, it's like Victorian mad science. And they're like, oh, good, because that's much shorter than the normal 10-minute answer. So
you never want to say, let's sit down.
Yeah. Get a cuppa, we have a talk. So I try really hard on that front for myself. But obviously I do Victoriana, so keep that in mind. I do love it, but I'm also aware that it's not the whole of the thing.
Madam Askew, should we talk a bit about costuming?
I mean, we should always talk about costuming.
But I have a thought on this very topic that is costuming.
Yes, please bring it.
All right, so the chief inspector,
yes,
in fiction is British.
Yes,
but Dr. McTrowell is actually an American, and she's from the West.
Oh, yes.
And we have actually in our stories addressed some of the topics that you've just. We've got Hawaiians in the Hawaiian Triple Cross, and but
Major Indian.
yeah. Oh, yeah, right. One of our major characters is half Indian and half British. Jonathan Lord Ashley, and he has an interesting backstory. But with respect to costuming, so it's a funny thing as a writer. Sometimes you write things, you're like, I need to put something here, and you just write something, and then later somebody goes, what was that thing? And you're like, ah. And for us, the first one of those was the Pecos incident. So there's one thing where somebody says about Dr. McTrowell, and who can forget the Pecos incident? And they're just on. It's like nothing. And we're like, okay, we have got to explain that at some point. So, and I'm promising this is coming back to costuming.
Yes.
And the Pecos incident happens around the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, when the U.S. takes a huge part of what was then Mexico, which we happen to be sitting in at this very moment.
Hello, Mexico.
Yes. But it also turns out to be the backstory of the coat. It's Sparky's, doing something, and it's freezing cold, and she's like, I'm never freezing again. And so she goes to a place which is obviously owned by somebody who's Mexican, right? Because it's, near Albuquerque, in 1849, and buys the coat. And so there's this tie-in between all of these things, between costuming and the history of these various places. And there's another costume in my teeny tiny repertoire as compared to the magnificence, which is Madame Scu's.
I'm really extra though. I'm not a good exemplar. Or am I?
Deep end of the pool. But it's my Western, because you're saying it's not all Victoriana,
No.
because there are fascinating things happening in the Americas at that point.
Absolutely.
And so there are Western costumes for us. I have one I call Sparky Del Pecos, and it's sort of almost time period appropriate. So
It's delightful. Yes. Dear Erasmus.
Let me
Yes.
say a few words about maybe getting started.
Yes, please.
And because I think about such things. So if you're interested in dressing as steampunk, let me start with the thing you don't have to do. And often the pictures you see, particularly if you Google images steampunk, one is you're going to get many young ladies that are dressed up, which is fine. But
And Thomas Rutherford.
yeah, you just can't get rid of that guy. No, he's a good guy. So, one of the things you'll see is there's this meme that keeps happening over and over again, which is steampunk is mad scientists or inventors or extreme aristocrats, and they're usually slightly mad. But that's really sort of a very small part of the population at the time. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, the vast majority of people were poor, working hard, etc. And they fit into that just as well. So if I were starting off today and I was on a budget, I would probably look at the fact that at the time clothes were not quote unquote sized or tailor-made. So I would go to a thrift store and buy a shirt that's too big and then use something to hold my sleeves up.
Sleeve guard.
And I would, sleeve garters. And I would get a hat that's too big, maybe a little ripped, but it has some age on it. And I would buy a broomstick and take everything off and make it into a chimney sweep thing and put some makeup on. And probably for less than $100, I could actually be a pretty impressive person for that era. Now, once again, I'm leaning towards the Victorian side. But there are, that's sort of the way to think, is that the vast majority of people did not have enough money to wear what we're wearing. We're sort of playing this aristocratic upper class, almost cartoonish version of what's going on. However, which is a lot of fun because you can sort of make up a personality associated with that.
Well, it's kind of like the SCA being all lords and ladies.
Yeah.
Well put. And so, the first people that I would think about, and unfortunately being male, I would think about chimney sweeps, people who handle coal, people who keep boilers working, all of those maintenance type jobs or even less. But I'm sure there's the equivalent side for all the genders. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're just starting off, literally you can get goggles, something to tie around your neck, which can actually just be a sash or a bow tie or whatever.
Scarf.
And the rest can be almost anything, and a lot of it is your personality and how you present it.
No, David, I really like that point, and I'd love to get some more thoughts on beginner options. I'd say you could probably get out of the door at a charity shop doing that for like $20.
Okay.
Yeah, especially here. Legit, if you go to Tucson Thrift, if you live here in Tucson, you go to Tucson Thrift, you can get a hat for $5, some sort of shirt-like thing that counts for, a couple bob here, and it's just very inexpensive. It's nice living not in Southern California. Things are much even our thrift store.
Even our thrift stores, yes.
Yeah.
But
We're from San Diego, where there's a multiplier.
Yes,
Yeah.
10 times. So the other thing I liked, you was talking about a variety of jobs. And just like I think steampunk is not only in England and in the Victorian era, it was all over the world. It is not only 5 jobs either. And in a world that continues to have steam, you're going to have so many things that people need to do. Some of them legal, some of them not. Some of them mundane, some of them more, exciting. And we don't have an order like the SCA where you have to work to get a title or someone bestows your AOA on you. So you can just be like, well, I'm Lord Bubbly Squeak and this is my tea plantation in Darjeeling. And we go, hello, Lord Bubbly Squeak, how's your tea? Sounds grand. All right. So, please.
Well, and actually, so on the beginner thing, I want to add 2 things. First, as beginners, one thing I loved in steampunk again is I met this person who was pretty much like famous in steampunk society who just opened arms to us and treated us as if we had been doing steampunk as long as he had. Respected every ridiculous choice that we had made at the time. And, and that's what I love in this community is it isn't something where you have to come in and, like, not that there's anything wrong with coming in as something and proving yourself. But I actually really like, because for me, fashion, cosplay, it's fun. I want to go, I want to have fun. I don't want to do more work. I want to, go at it and just meet somebody and say hello, and they tilt their hat, and I do my crazy skirt thing, and we go. I think it's called a curtsy or something like that. Crazy skirt thing. And it's fun. It's a form of play and relaxation. So I actually feel like Steampunk's a great fashion and cosplay style to get into because there aren't so many bars and rules. And you can do what you want. You can change it whenever you want. You don't have to start something and then continue to do it. You can add on. And I think I like to add to, as well, costume ideas on how to start. You do not have to be brown. You don't have to wear brown. You don't, and I'm just going to say it one more time. You don't have to wear brown. I don't know how that happened, that in the pictures, they're brown. Everyone's got on brown. Like, brown's fine. But you actually, brown, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't have to. And you also don't have to put gears on anything. There was a song that came out, just put some gears on it. Oh my gosh! And it's hilarious. But
Gentleman Rhymer?
Maybe.
Was it Gentleman Rhymer or was it that fellow out of New England?
English gentleman. Hold on, I get his name.
Okay, I feel
Professor
embarrassed.
Elemental?
No, it was a third gentleman.
Yeah.
I have it on my playlist. Hold on.
And that was how, at the time, how many things were just like, I found these boots, they need gears or they can't be steampunk. There really weren't gears on things, like, whether you're being historically accurate or not, you don't need gears on your boots, you don't need them on your goggles, you don't need goggles. Because I do feel like some people feel very limited, no offense, Godzilla, that they have to do this or else it's not steampunk, no offense, respect. Yes, thank you. But you really don't have to do that. A lot of our character things came out of the fact that, so kind of jokingly, lovingly to these older people who we were with at the time, we were quite young, we became apprentice-style characters. This was an age of apprenticeship. A lot of the jobs that you had. There you go.
Esquire.
Yeah, play a little of that. It's actually, you just have to, it has a good thing.
It's catchy. Hold it, Sorry.
You're going to get it.
But a lot of it,
Old-timey
we
stuff.
shouldn't go too far.
Oh yeah, it's a long one. And there's a steampunk twist.
Yeah,
Futuristic.
yeah. Right. We like that, the sort of pastiche.
There you go.
There you go, that's it.
Funny costume story about gluing gears on something.
Yes.
Let me just jump. No.
Please.
So
I got this
gentleman. Thank you.
I have this costume that has this very full skirt that's silk, which is, there's a long story behind that. I need way too much money for it. But beside the point, I saw a woman at an event who had these adorable shoes, kind of low heel, with these like geary butterflies on the front, and I'm like, oh, that would be perfect with that skirt. So I bought those, and the first event I wore them to, I discovered, to my chagrin, that those little geary things on the front of the shoes are like little hooky things, and like the first 3 steps, and they're just ripping the hem out of the skirt. I'm like, oh my god, what do I do? Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I should have warned you.
It's good.
There should have been like a trigger warning for that. And so this girlfriend of mine, who's a costumer, she's like, oh, we can fix that. And she just walks up to me, she grabs my skirt, big full skirt, it's like this, and she just goes, she takes like a handful and she goes, and she stuffs it in my waistband, she goes, and she stuffs it in my waistband, she goes, there, fixed. And I'm like, okay then. And then I bought a pair of skirt lifters from some other girlfriend, so now I can wear it. But it's like, you gotta look at, those gear things are sharp.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
they are.
just, you should test run your costumes before you wear them.
That sounds like a steampunk job, skirt lifter.
It was for the smallest of children. They hid under your skirts. It was a works program for
Yes.
destitute children in the workhouse. We lend them out to be skirt lifters.
Our exact characters.
Is that why Russell's got so big in the back? Was
Yes.
to hold up all the
For the children. It's for the children. We're going to say something.
We're gonna keep doing.
Yes, we are.
We're gonna riff on this all day. So, I can see the badge.
Oh no, David! You've just given me ideas.
Chief skirt lifter. So, I was going to say that historically, steampunk, this is in the real world, when it first started, which was in the aughts, the big thing wasn't gears. It was clocks.
Yeah.
And people used to wear
Yes.
these clocks around their neck and clocks all over the place.
Flavor Flav.
Both. Flavor Flav and steampunk.
Yeah, and you can see that obviously has progressed, but I often wonder, well, after we get through the gears, what's the next thing?
Yes.
And I think it's hydraulic lifters, but
Yeah.
I have a question. Maybe it is the next thing. I don't know. Like in Gail Carriger's books, the Parasol Protectorate, there's like vampires and werewolves and werelinuses and weremonkeys and all that. Can you be a supernatural being as well?
So actually, can I? So I haven't talked about my character at all. Mostly because it's kind of like aside, yeah, from the point. But so my character has evolved from this maid cafe that we did, and he's actually from a world of magic. He was a magician apprentice, and then he, through a series of unfortunate events, ends up trapped in this inter-reality web, and he's trying to escape. And the main world, like the hub world that the first world that he and Replica end up in, is a steampunk world. And so he has to kind of unravel some puzzles there, but it's very much this idea that, he comes to this world and he's like, what the hell is going on? Things run on steam. And he's really angry throughout the first major part of the story, because he's like, this is totally inefficient. Like, I can come up with 100 ways to do better, even with the technology they have. But he has to make it work, because he has to fit in. So I feel like you can very much integrate the two. It doesn't have to be like they come from a different world, but I think that in its essence, steampunk is about the technology and the culture and the kind of society, and it's perfectly natural to then add fantastical elements to that, because it doesn't exclude that from just thinking about the history and the society and the culture. So I think it's a very natural thing, especially those of us who love fantasy, to add those fantastical elements in.
Absolutely.
And
right on.
And I know a lot of costumers and people who say, I can steampunk that. And so, particularly if you go to Comic-Con in San Diego, you'll see a lot of mashups of steampunk and something else. So, particularly steampunked superheroes are very popular at Comic-Con, and some of the costumes are really amazing. So yeah, I mean, I can steampunk that, right? So there's an awful lot of that.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I also think it's so grand to add supernatural elements, because if you're coming from that 19th century sort of inspiration source, they were obsessed, historically, obsessed with the supernatural, the spiritualism, the vampire tales coming out in the 19th century, like Varney and Dracula. And so they were themselves obsessed. So why not play on that? Well, you were obsessed with it because it was real.
Yeah.
Going back to the steampunk scholar, one of the things he said is steampunk you can think of as an art form in which to pour something else. So, and your art then fills that up. And you can pour in magic and other things, but have the aesthetic, much in the same sense that you can make something Art Deco or Art Nouveau or modern. They're still houses, but they just have a different skin. One of the things that he pointed out in the traditional sense that steampunk came out of literature, and you can sort of think of the Jules Verne, or etc. But one of the things he said is that there is almost always some kind of, and what we would in the modern world call magic, but what they called science. There's usually some green goop, or there's some kind of ether, or there's something that's really not quite, that allows you to use a steam boiler in an airship.
It actually flies.
Or that you could travel so fast that you needed goggles or your eyeballs would just dry out. Whatever that was, and though I know I'm kind of making the leap from sort of magical extra science concept over to the kind of other types of worlds, but all of those things can be poured in, and like you said, you can think of it as a mashup, but really it's a skin that you're putting on things.
Totally.
I like that. Yeah, Dr. Perchon is very much like, it is an aesthetic, and I love that idea, and it's been sort of a revelation to me. Also, obviously, I recommend him to all of you. He's a lovely character. He has a website, and he's really
And his
active
book
on
is
Twitter.
just out.
Yeah, no, it came out. He debuted it yesterday, didn't he?
Yep, Steampunk FAQ.
FAQ.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just out.
We ordered it on the interwebs.
Oh,
Last
that's right. So that's going to definitely be a good read, by the way. So I'm sure there was a question in there somewhere or something.
We
I
had
don't
for a
know.
couple of
Yeah.
pragmatic logistic
I think
suggestions.
if everyone went down the row and offered like a favourite piece of advice or pragmatic sort of thing, that would be good. Would
Okay.
you like to start, Sparky, because it's your idea?
Okay, so in real life, I'm a computer scientist, and I might be a little bit obsessive compulsive, and so I have no joke. Like it's news.
What was that? I didn't hear you.
I, honest to God, have a spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet has in the left column the names of all of my costumes. They all have names, and then there's an individual column for the shoes and the top and the bottom and the stockings and the fans and the what?
The components.
There's all the components that make up this costume. And so first of all, this by itself is a very handy thing because I've done this more than once. You get to the con, you're like hundreds of miles from home, and you're like, oh no, I forgot literally one time the stockings that went with actually this costume. And I had to rush around, and it was in this little nowhere town in Northern California to find something I could wear. So first of all, that's very handy, so you don't forget any of the bits of your costume. But the other thing I will tell you, and I suspect this applies to women or people who cosplay as women more than it does to men, which is that not all of the bits of your costume are as comfortable as the other ones. And so I actually have this spreadsheet marked where some of the cells are marked in red, which means, hey, this bit's not very comfy. Remember that. Like, these shoes aren't very comfy, so if you're going to be walking, don't do that. I'm not personally very comfortable in corsets. So if you saw me last night at the fashion show, in my Queen of Hearts costume, visually I'm very proud of it. I'm only good for a couple of hours in that costume. And the famous San Diego maker, the Iron Tailor,
Oh, Bob.
Yeah, Bob Mog. There was a Bob Mog point in here about something.
Yes, stage versus.
Thank you so much, my darling. There are hall costumes and there are stage costumes, and he says it from the perspective of how finished the costume looks when people are close to you or far away. But the other thing is, the costume you can wear on stage, like last night, so wear it for half an hour, do the thing, get out of the costume, is very different from the costume you're going to wear standing in the vendor hall all day. So I would say, think about that with your costumes and what you're going to be doing in them, because you don't want to be miserable. And I will also say, as a finishing on this, plan for the entire weekend. In fact, we were talking earlier, it's like, okay, I'm going to wear that fabulous costume the first day, but I know by the third day, my feet are going to be hating me and I'm not lacing myself up. So stage your costumes for how tired you're going to be.
And think about how you can go to the bathroom and eat food.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. My advice may be hopefully interesting and hasn't been stated before, which is when you go into the steampunk community, what is evolved into is not only dressing up, having a character, but another component that has become very important is what we call the maker side. And the maker side says, I know how to tailor something or make it mine in some way, shape, or form. So if you're going into this, not only think about the character and the clothes, but I would suggest if you already have a talent, wonderful, expand upon it. But if you don't, learn to sew on a button. Learn how to work with epoxy glue, or learn something and become the king or queen of doing that, so that when you meet somebody in the steampunk community, after you explain your character and you go, oh, that's wonderful, then you can also say, look, I sewed this button on, or I made these buttons, or I did this hat myself. You don't have to be great at it. You just have to learn a little, because I find that it's the maker community that's actually more curing steampunk right now than all the interesting little personality things.
So I have a lot of responses. I'm going to throw in really quick, and then also my personal advice. I think that if you're a steampunk, you are a maker. You're either making a community, you're making stories, you're making art and costume, you're making something. And here in Tucson, if you want to learn to make something, we do workshops for free, like 8-9 months out of the year, every month, and it's free. You come, we'll teach you how to do things. And every steampunk I know loves to teach something, and they definitely love to talk about the thing. So, oh, tell me about those buttons you sewed on. Let me give you the history. So my favorite advice for getting going in steampunk, especially on the costuming front and the character front, is marry them. Have your costume tell a story. The elements of your costume when you're shopping, you said it earlier, if you're not careful you'll end up with like chaos. I am chaos, that's fine with me, but if you have a plan and a character, or at least a character and theme for a particular costume, and you make everything with an eye towards how does this develop my character, what statement does it make about my background, my employment, my age, my likes, my favorite color, how often I have access to clean water, if I'm dying from cyanide poisoning. It's the 19th century. It's a lot of death.
It's grungy.
Yeah, it's grungy. Nothing's really that shiny for long. So just finding those elements and including some story bits. I mean, all of my costumes relate to some aspect of my character and personality. They have a lot of story that's real and a lot of made-up story. So I find that really helps.
I think I would add, as far as starting your costumes out. First, I want to say, really, if you can do a spreadsheet, or we use just those Dollar Tree suit bags and put the whole costume together in the bag. Like, if you can find a way to organize it, do, because for a while, every single con we went to out of town, we would be at Walmart at the last minute, near tears, trying to find. I forgot a dress once, a whole dress, and like trying to find something. And it's like, okay, well, just don't wear a costume that day. That's not how it works for me. So yeah, try to get organized, and also really find your thing. Like, whatever it is that you do, or maybe you want it to do, like, find your thing that you really like. I'm a fan of all things dark and creepy. And so a lot of my stuff, that comes out. You were saying, what's the next thing? I think the next thing are insects. I'm seeing a lot of insect stuff in steampunk recently, whether they be, like someone made them insects. But yeah, and what's nice about it is, again, it kind of feeds a little bit of my darkness of some dead thing that I'm wearing. Find your thing, similar to like the thing that you make. It might not be something that you make or art, but you can have a look even. Maybe you want to be, voodoo king, steampunk type of thing, and that becomes your thing. And it's not even to show off. It's just you want to be comfortable, not just physically in your clothes, but feeling like yourself while also maybe being a little bit of somebody else.
So, I just wanted to mention before we go that you shouldn't underestimate found items. So a lot of the elements that we incorporate into our costumes are not things we bought. We do go to the thrift store a lot to get some of our stuff. But it's just things that, like, we were taking apart and there was this one piece that's like, Or, like, I know you've done this before where, like, you just crunched up something to throw away, and I'm like, no, it's the perfect shape. And she's like, What are you talking about? But so don't underestimate the power of just like random stuff that you find around, and then you think about how you can steampunk it. Even if it's as simple as going and buying some spray paint and spray painting it. But it could also be something that just really fits, and you can make a necklace out of it, or you can make an armband out of it, or whatever. But I think that a lot of people underestimate just what's around you, and the things that sometimes we just throw away. And I think that those are some of the most fun elements that we've had on our cosplays.
All right, so I think we're about at time. What's that time?
May I give
Yes.
a 30-second story?
No, you may. I was about to ask for last comments, so you
okay.
can.
Oh, okay.
Please.
I'll try to keep this short. This is a Googleable item. In San Diego, a bunch of steampunks got kicked out of a mall because they wanted to ride a carousel. And the outcome of that was that they were interviewed by the local news, which was then picked up by an LA station, and that was then broadcast at a national level by CNN that steampunks were thrown out of this mall. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that something so negative happened, and the reason why was that the mall cops, if you want to call them that, were basically following their policy to the letter, which is nobody should show up in costume unless it's Halloween, and these people were clearly in costume because they were dressed like Victorians. So, but the story that came out of it was that they had a camera, and live on TV, well, not live, but sent out, there was a woman they were recording who was a little younger than me, but she was heavy set, and she said, they asked her, why do you dress like a steampunk? And rather than giving sort of the standard answer, she said, I put makeup on and a dress every day and go to work, and nobody notices. Mm-hmm. But when I put on a steampunk outfit and I put on my favorite hat and I show up, everybody tells me I'm beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just a personality change. It's not a pretending to be something else. Mm-hmm. They told her she was beautiful, dressed as a steampunk.
That's lovely. Thank you. Do you have any last questions before we wrap it up? Panelists, do you have any last tidbit you'd like to share before we bid adieu?
I think we're just going to plug. You can find us at theindigopath.com.
Yes.
We got cards on the table. And we do, again, art. We make those shiny things he was talking about. Like, never be ashamed to get your stuff made for you if you just want to have it made.
Yeah, we do custom.
Yeah, we do custom work as well. And I bought these guys' books. You should buy it, too. At least.
Wow, thank you. We did not pay her to say that.
So where can we find you on the interwebs and here at the convention?
So here at the convention, we are in the vendor room. Dealer room here. Sometimes it's the merch hall, sometimes it's the vendor room. So we are there. We have all sorts of books. If you haven't nabbed some, please come nab one because we'd rather not carry them home. And on the interwebs, you can find us at, I know you're going to be stunned by this, drakeandmctrowell.com. 2 L's in McTrowell. But if you get as far as Drake and McTrowell, I'm pretty sure that Google will cough up the right answer.
That's true, it will.
Yes. Like us on Facebook. We don't spam people. We mostly do I shared the video from last night, and if we're going to be at a con, I do one post that goes, hey, we're going to the con, here's what we're going to be doing, or if we have a new book out, but we're not like, every day, buy our book. No, we don't do that. That's not us.
The one thing I would add to that is on our website, we also have what's called the logbook, which means if you want, you can send us a picture of yourself in your steampunk outfit, and if you have a backstory, we will post that for you, and we will keep it permanently on the web, and it's just a fun thing we do for people in the steampunk.
Thank you, all of the panelists here. It's so lovely having this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, no, I love this. I get to be with all my friends and talk about steampunk. Thank all of you also for joining us today. I hope you had a lovely time. Hope to see you out at some events. I mean, here in Tucson, the TSS hosts an event a month. We have book club pretty much every month. We do workshops like every month. So you should come do something with us some month, because it's happening. Promise.
And bound to be loads of fun.
Thank you. All right, cheers. the next panel, so we'll sit here.
Stay right there. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.